Hello, everyone. Welcome to another entry in the 2023 Halloween Mayothon, where I'm going to be talking about different horror movies on different days. Today, we're going to cover a classic, and that classic, of course, is 1973's The Exorcist, one of my all-time favorite horror movies. So much has been said about this film. There's very little I can add to it. But I thought what I would do for this video is talk about how The Exorcist has affected me over the years. I won't do a full-blown review of it per se, although I'll mention what I think here and there. But how it's affected me over the years, and in particular, now that it's the 50th anniversary, and I just came from a screening on the big screen again for the 50th anniversary for Fathom events. Now, I saw it on Sunday, October the 1st, and there's still a little bit of time, if you can make it, for a repeat showing from Fathom events on Wednesday, October the 4th. So look up your local theaters and see who's showing it. Okay, well, this was going to be a big event. I got together with four other people, including my girlfriend and two of my nephews, and then the fiance of one of my nephews. So there were five of us all together. We had made these plans for a while, and we got our seats all together. Things didn't work out 100% because they were slightly late to the movie, and we couldn't talk beforehand. And then they had to go home really fast at the end because it was a long trip. So we didn't get to talk afterwards, but there'll be more about that maybe later. All right, let's talk a little bit about the background of The Exorcist. Everybody knows it's considered one of the scariest movies of all time, one of the most disturbing films of all time. Now, when The Exorcist first came out, I was 11, going on 12, really, and I loved horror movies at that time, but there was no way I could see The Exorcist. And of course, there were all these reports about people fainting, dead away, not able to stomach the movie, and people walking out shaking their heads. Oh my God, they couldn't believe it. They never saw anything like this before, right? And I heard all the buzz as a child, I remember. In fact, there's the magazine Famous Monsters of Filmland, and one of the issues that had The Exorcist premiere on the cover says, "Can you take The Exorcist?" I mean, it was a big thing. There were no slasher films at this time, people, right? No slasher films, not a lot of really real gore, unless you watch some Herschel Gordon Lewis stuff, or, you know, or some maybe stuff from Europe or something. But this just was really largely a new phenomenon, okay? And of course, the book of The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty had been so disturbing and so horrific. The movie comes close, but I think the book is even more upsetting if you read the book. So I wasn't able to see it when it first came out, but my mom saw it, and she was really affected by it when it was in the theater in 74, I guess she saw it maybe. Now, I had a sister, a younger sister that was, at the time, I think she was 10 years old at the time. And because of the situation where we were living, my mom actually shared a bed with my 10-year-old sister. They had to sleep together in one bed, big bed. And it was not an easy task for my mom to come home late at night with the lights out and have to sleep with her daughter on the other side of the bed after seeing this movie. Let me tell you that. I didn't get a chance to see The Exorcist in its full theatrical glory until 1979. In 1979, it was brought back to theaters, and I was now 17 years old, so I could get in to see it. And boy, did I love it. I felt the power, the fear, the terror, the intensity, the disturbing nature of it. I was really affected by it. Now, I saw it, I think, a couple of times, at least twice, maybe more, in the theater when it came back into the movie theater. And back then, they didn't have VHS or any home video. You couldn't just rent The Exorcist. You hadn't had Blockbuster yet. You hadn't really had VHS tapes. They were just starting to come around. So I actually am such a fanatic. I used to bring an audio tape recorder in, and press the button and tape it on cassette tape, the audio. And I wish I still had that tape. I don't, but I can remember like the gasps of the audience all at once, like, and oh, and all this. And every time there'd be a horrific scene, and these horrific scenes in The Exorcist, they build, The first scene is down here. The second time you get a crazy possession scene, it's up here. Next possession scene is up here and up here until you get to the final exorcism, when all hell breaks loose, literally, right? And every time there'd be a shocking scene, there'd be gasping and startled sounds. And then when it was over, there'd be quiet. And the whole audience would erupt into laughter. They'd all laugh, not because they thought it was comical or funny, but because they had been so scared they were laughing. And I remember that very, very clearly, and I'm glad I had that opportunity in 1979, if not 1973 or 74, mainly. Okay? And since then, at that time, when that passed by, I wound up getting The Exorcist on my first Warner Brothers video cassette, watched it 100 times. I know every word of The Exorcist. I know every frame of film. As far as which version I prefer, it's hard to say. Do I prefer the original theatrical version? Do I prefer the version you haven't seen or never saw that came out in 2000, the longer director's cut? The simple answer to that is there are items that I like in the new 2000 extended cut and things I don't like. I'll talk about that maybe one day in a separate video. But for now, it was just great to be able to see this again 50 years later. Now, the question is, does The Exorcist retain its power to terrify and to disturb and upset? Now, in my case, as I say, I was greatly affected by it when I was a teenager and first saw it. It worked. It worked. I was haunted by it. I thought of it in school. I still was in the end of my high school days, and I remember thinking about it in school. Couldn't forget it. But I've seen it partly because of the reason I've seen it so many times, whether it's 100 times or whether it's more like 62, I don't know. But I've seen it so many times and I know it so well. I know what's coming. I know what to expect. I know the vomit scene is coming. I know the crucifix scene is coming. I know everything that's going to happen, So it doesn't retain the surprise, the element of surprise. I think William Friedkin, the late director who just passed away, I believe it might have been in August. I think he does a great job at mounting suspense. I think this is a suspenseful film, more than horrific. It's suspenseful. It builds the intensity. Even something like the first real exorcism possession scene, where you see the possession scene, where you first see Linda Blair starting to flop around on the bed and she's bouncing up and down. And there's a call made to the doctors, and the doctors come in a panic, and everything's helter-skelter and crazy, and the camera's winding up the stairs, and it's a little shaky, and the doctors go in, and there's Linda Blair in full possession, smacking the doctor across the room, and all the way it's filmed is just intense. This is an intense, gripping film, and it's balanced in such a good way that it gives you a chance to catch your breath, and then you go a little bit more with some narrative and, story, and then boom, another scene, and relax again. But I have to say, at this point in my life, being the age that I am now, having seen this many, many times, it lost a little bit of its power for me. But I'm pretty sure that the reason is, for me personally, I'm speaking from my perspective. I think that for me, the reason is because I've seen it so many times. Although, I'll interject this, I love the movie Jaws, one of my favorites. And anytime I see Jaws on the big screen or at home on my own television, watching it on a Blu-ray or something, Jaws is excellent every time. It loses nothing. Jaws has not lost anything over the years. Jaws has not lost anything over the repeated 188th viewing. Nothing. Exorcist is a little bit that case. I'm curious as to what new people think. Now, I know some younger people I know tend to think it's funny. They tend to think it's hilarious hearing a young girl cussing and swearing up a storm. Seeing her, yell obscenities at priests and vomit on them. They think it's so funny. I think that's sad. I think that's sad that people don't see how horrendous that is, in the sense that, here you have a little girl who Friedkin takes great pains to show you just how precious she is and how sweet she is, and how her and her mom have such a touching relationship, and it's so bonded, that when she starts doing these things, that she's so different. Her personality is completely changed. Yeah. So I'm there. I think The Exorcist is a great film. Still, at this point in my life, I feel it's lost a little something, mainly because of my overexposure to it, but also the fact that we've seen a lot worse now. It's hard to believe that some of these things were such a change, so world changing when they came out. The makeup, the effects, and it's a beautiful thing that this was all done by practical effects, the old-fashioned way. They had to take the room at the end of the exorcism was all their breath was coming out of the actors. They didn't do that with CGI breath, CGI mist. They had to make the set like a freezer. They had to act in a refrigerator practically to do this, refrigerate the whole set, things like that. The makeup, the way that Dick Smith, the great makeup man, with this had Linda Blair able to spew some vomit, or should I say, her stunt woman, Eileen Dietz, really, for that scene. But the way they're able to make it happen, and the head switch turning around without computer graphics and cartoon trickery, which I loathed. And in the new version of The Exorcist, the extended version, there's some of that CG cartoonery here and there that I don't like, that they added in there and tarnished it with. But anyway, when the movie was over, I really wanted to get the reaction of my two nephews who are in their early 30s, and maybe, my one of my nephews, a fiance. But it was really like a hustle thing, and we weren't even able to have a 5-minute time to stand outside in a little circle and say, well, what'd you think? So maybe I'll talk to them another time about it. But yeah, the theater, I forgot to mention, I was disappointed. It was a Sunday night. There were 5 of us, and I think maybe 5 other people in there. By the way, hello, if you're watching, to the viewer who recognized me, who watches my Mean Mr. Mayo channel, the Beatles. He recognized me sitting there before the show, and it was nice to talk to you. Hope you're watching the movie channel. Anyway, yeah, very, very sparsely attended. I think there were 5 other people, maybe 10 of us all together in the theater on a Sunday night. I don't know if Wednesday night's going to be any better. I would have thought this would have been killer. I don't know if there had been an afternoon show. I don't know. I don't know how many showings there are there. 2 shows on Sunday and 2 shows on Wednesday, or just 1 each day. I don't know. But, yeah, I'm glad I got to see it again. What can I say? It's not my first time viewing. The Exorcist is a great horror classic. Still has intensity, still has suspense, still has some disturbing moments, but yeah, it's 50 years old. I want to know what your thoughts are. Thank you for joining me, folks.